At the end of day 1 of the World Blitz Championship, Levon Aronian leads the field with an impressive 10 out of 13, and I want to take a look back at one of his best games played today. This is a really epic game that he played against Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Levon had black here, and we're going to see this amazing queen sack for 3 pieces. So we had this e4 move from Duda, slightly unusual. Often white will just go d4 here, but okay, this is blitz chess, the players love to mix it up. Now often white goes e5 here, but instead Duda takes first here, pawn recaptures, and now he goes e5. You don't want to take here as white, because after these captures you're left with this structurally bad isolated d-pawn. So that's why the pawn pushed on, and now we had d4 from black. Really standard play, and again as white you want to take on f6, which Duda did. You don't want to move that knight passively away. So black captures here, and now Duda throws in this check. Tricky little move. You can play pawn to c6 here, and there'd be similar ideas to what we saw in the game. So queen e2 check. You can't block on e7 as we can see, so you'd have to go bishop e6 rather, and then we'd have, say, bishop c4, and you can see there's some uncomfortable pressure here. And even though black can win a pawn in this line by taking on d2 with check, the bishop recaptures, queen f6. After bishop to c3, it's just a bit uncomfortable for black here, and we can see there's going to be some challenges developing the king side in a comfortable way. So Levon didn't want to go in for this, and instead of playing pawn to c6, he played knight to c6. We still had queen to e2 check, but now we had bishop e6 and pawn takes on c3. This time bishop c4 isn't nearly as powerful. For starters, you could just play knight d4 here. We can see the power of that knight having developed. But we didn't have this. We had pawn takes on c3. Now queen takes on f6. Knight to f3 development. Bishop d6. And here Jan-Krzysztof goes slightly wrong. He plays bishop to g5 here. It looks so natural, so you can't really criticise too much in blitz chess. But actually better would have been something like, say, knight to g5, just preparing to pick up this bishop pair after, say, castles takes on e6. But we didn't have this. We had bishop to g5, but after queen to g6, bishop to d3, kicking that queen, and queen to h5, it's just a bit tricky for Duda now to comfortably develop his pieces. This bishop now has to be babysat by the knight on f3. We can't move that knight away comfortably, and therefore you'd have to retreat the bishop really for it not to be a tactical liability, and then you're losing time. So this is kind of the problem. So we had pawn to h3 now from Duda. He's setting up ideas of a pawn storm on the king side. Castles now from Levon, and castles queenside from Duda. So here we go, taking the fight to Levon, preparing g4 and trying to checkmate on the king side. And now we had a great move from Aronian, knight to e5, really nice. You can't take here, or you're picking up this bishop with check, and after, say, the king moves away, then you take here and you've won a piece. And the problem that white's got now is this knight is being pressured, but it has to defend the bishop, as we mentioned earlier. And so that's why Duda goes bishop e4 here, to try and sort out this problem tactically. Just a quick note, if he goes g4 to break this pin here, well, now you can just take here with check. Say queen recaptures, queen g6, and you could have a line like this, and black's just doing well now. They've got the bishop pair, an open line for the rook, there's a backwards f-pawn, not good. So that's why in this position we had bishop to e4 instead, trying to resolve this problem tactically, because now when Levon takes here, Duda goes pawn to h4, and his idea is that you can't move the knight away now, or your queen drops on h5, but better here would have been bishop to e3, just stepping that bishop out of the way of tactics. But okay, Duda goes pawn to h4, and now if you want to pause the video and find an awesome move that Levon played, then please do so. And if you're enjoying this and want to see more future content, then do hit here to subscribe. We had knight takes on g5, awesome move, giving the queen, which is now taken on h5, but the bishop on e4 drops. So black has 3 pieces now for the queen, which is more than enough material in compensation. Plus they're just so active and well coordinated. White's in all sorts of trouble now. So queen to f3, holds this pawn, attacks the knight, clears the way for these pawns. Now we had pawn to f5, great move, bolstering that knight and starting to activate this rook. Pawn to g4 now, seeking to undermine the knight. And Levon played the other rook across to the centre of the board, looks really good. He actually had an amazing move here. You're never going to see this, but I thought I'd show it because it's quite fun. You can actually take that pawn, because if queen captures, now you have bishop f4 check. If the king steps here, you're picking up the queen here, so you can't do that. So you'd have to block with the rook, and then you could have a line like this, takes with check, king recaptures, rook check here. Say the king moved to c1, there's different options, but bishop d5 now skewering here, so you'd have to drop the queen back to the back rank. We pick up another tempo, queen moves away, and after these exchanges here, we take on f2, and this is just winning with the two rooks against the queen. There's checkmating threats, it's all falling apart. So you're never going to see that, like I say. I just thought it was really quite a fun line to show. Coming back here though, Levon centralised the rook, and now we had pawn to g5. Duda's desperately trying to generate some counterplay against the king, but bishop c5, great move, now threatening to fork here. So we had rook to h2 defending, and bishop takes on a2 now, not just grabbing a pawn for pawn's sake, but because now you can actually sit the bishop on b3 where there's lots of threats against the rook and the king. So that's why we had pawn to b4, trying to gain time against this bishop, but also not letting that bishop just sit in front of the pawn. And after the bishop retreated to d6, now Duda just desperately tries to generate some play. So he sacks the exchange here, the pawn recaptures, and he goes king to b2. The bishop drops back now, and queen to f4. So Duda's now pressuring this pawn. He also defends the g5 pawn from the knight, which could free up h5. And it's just a nice move to bring it onto the dark square and look at d2. In response, we had rook to c8, attacking here. Now rook to h3, defending. And rook to c4, activating the rook and setting up all kind of threats along this rank against the queen now. So rook to e3, hits that knight, but rook to d8 just holds this pawn so that now the knight is free to move away. And once again, there's just so many tactics and nothing that Duda can do. He plays pawn to h5, and Levon simply crashes through now with knight takes on c3, opening up this attack to the queen. The queen dropped back, the bishop came to d5, hitting that queen, and after the queen took on f5, we had rook to f8, and this was the final move of the game. This can't be taken because it's defended, and as soon as the queen moves away, let's say to d3, doesn't matter where it goes, well now we chop here with check and everything's collapsing. Amazing game from Aronian, giving up his queen for 3 pieces, and what a day he had. If you enjoyed this video, then do hit here to subscribe and see another amazing epic chess game. Click here. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.